Hey guys, in this video we're going to be checking out the Mezco Toyz 112 Collective. This is the previews exclusive of Universal Monsters Frankenstein. If you were to inquire as to how tall Frankenstein's monster is, let's reassure you by grabbing the tape measure and telling you that he's exactly 7 inches tall, which I always find is misleading because you look at the 1/12 scale figures from Mezco, they always look like they're smaller, but really they're not that much different in height than other like regular release figures like NECA. Like it's basically like the exact same height of figure as a NECA release. Frankenstein does come with a display stand, a really cool display stand featuring the electrical rods and the electricity running in between. The stand-wise, it does have a little peg there, so you can attach it to his feet via the peg holes on the underside. It serves a good enough purpose. I mean, granted, the stand does look a little large for the figure, but it does accommodate him just perfectly fine. If you prefer something a little bit more drastic and you want your Frankenstein to be floating or jumping or leaping, which really doesn't seem like something a character such as Frankenstein would do, he does have also the interchangeable neck that you can just swap the peg out and change this for, and then it has the waist clip. This hinges right at the bottom, the mid knuckle, and the top section here where the waist clip can open and close. Again, it's okay, but again, I really wouldn't probably display Frankenstein leaping or jumping or anything like that. He serves a better purpose in my feelings, at least, by having just, you know, just standing upright, maybe with his arms forward out. Rounding out the other bunch of stand and displaying options, they also include a 1/12 little baggie where you can keep basically all your odds and ends, all the extra pieces that you don't currently have them on display with, you can keep them in the little baggie, which again is a nice little touch. It beats putting them, because you could simply just put them into a Ziploc bag, but it gives you a little extra, you know, with a little label down there. So I always appreciate that. Okay, so let's have a look at, he does come with other accessories too, but we'll look at those. We'll look at those in a second. Let's first have a look at Frankenstein, which I have to admit looks really good. Now this is also the previews exclusive, but it really looks like a decent enough figure. It's one of the only other instances where I've picked up a 1/12 figure where it doesn't have the molded costume like the Batman and the Superman did, where proportions for these figures look like they were so greatly off. Here you basically have just a regular build figure, which actually I think is a better read for how these figures end up turning out. Overall, I really like it. I think it turned out pretty decently. Let's have a look at his face, and we'll kind of work our way down. Face sculpt, I think, is pretty good. While I would not admit it's the best, you know, bang-on likeness to Boris Karloff, I think it's still a pretty good likeness. The green certainly goes a long way, and I think where perhaps the sculpt might slightly fall short, I think the paint kind of picks up where it leaves off and runs with it to give us an overall pretty good executed figure. This is probably my preferred go-to face for, I think, displaying him. But again, he has the option of the interchangeable head. I'll show you that in a second. He's got, of course, the little bolts on the sides of his neck, a very low sunken brow. Coloring is kind of just paired between a kind of a slightly lighter green and a darker green that makes up the area of his cheeks and the interior of his eyes. It just really gives that recessed look of both. Got a little bit of wrinkling above the eyebrow or above the brow area as well. He's got the cut there on his forehead as well as the slice on the side of his neck. Hair is sculpted, I think, pretty good. again, where I feel like the sculpt might miss its mark slightly, I think the paint really drives home an all-around well-looking, well-executed Frankenstein. His hands, again, are that same sort of coloring as his head, making use of like that. It's hard to kind of pinpoint the color necessarily. I would almost say sage green, but then somebody would say, why would sage green? What a description to use. The hands specifically have some extra nice coloring there on the fingertips, which is something that gets left on the face. Again, my preferred look, and it probably is so cliche, is to probably have his fingers out and have him walking like so. He's got, as to be expected, like the Frankenstein sort of hunch on his shoulder, or on both shoulders for that matter. And again, things such as the typical elevated platform boots are also incorporated here as well. We just raise up the boots, you can see how far up said boots get to before you actually get to some Frankenstein skin underneath there. Again, it's not what you would necessarily display him with. I would never have the boots this, obviously this high up, but I think just for the sake of showing you in this review, we'll just bring the pant legs all the way down now that I've got them slightly stuck over the boot cuff. There we go, just kind of bring it down. I should have actually, see now it's all stuck on the boots. All this just to show off Frankenstein's skin underneath. Was it necessary? Probably not. I could have just foregoed and left it off completely. Here we go, just bring down the pant legs. All right, back on track, back to the review. Again, the jacket and the tailoring of the costume I think is pretty good actually. It looks sometimes when you take a larger scale figure and you shrink it down costume wise, stitching tends to look a little bit, tends to stand out a little bit because obviously the stitching stays the same size. But I think the stitching and the craftsmanship of the outfit still looks like it's scaled appropriately to the figure. It doesn't look like it's this, you know, the really bad looking doll outfits basically over top of the body. I think actually it looks pretty good on Frankie here. I do find his head is really loose, and I guess it's just the way it sits in the ball joint. The ball joint, like it looks like there's a considerable, just a considerable little hole there on the inside. Kind of lost for words today. The head, I mean, does sit on there, but it sits very, very loose. Very, very loose. If you want something a little bit more exaggerated, he does also have smoke good. He has this face as well. I prefer this face myself, but again, you have a couple of different options you can choose from. And taking the head off sits. That's one thing I think I would change differently to the ball joint here. I would have made it not necessarily a ball joint with a neck. I would almost make it just a cylinder where it would just have slid over top of the figure. Some would also say that it may not get as much the posability, but I feel like the head just sits really, really loose, unfortunately. One of the other things that this Frankie has is also a pair of kind of grabbing clawed hands, which look very nice. And you can go ahead and just change those out. And actually, while you're at it, if you take those off, like so, you can go ahead and take the shackles, which is one of the other things that he comes included with, and slide them over the hands before you put them onto the, I'm going to find the correct hand, of course, before you put it onto the forearm. And just attach it like so, wiggle it back onto place. There we go. And you can have Frankenstein with, theoretically, really both hands shackled. It doesn't give you that much clearance, but it gives you just enough that you could actually have both of them shackled. I'll only do it really on the one side so you guys can see. You can get them actually both shackled. These do also open and close too, so if you want just the easier means of putting them over his arms. I'm a little apprehensive though about opening and closing this, and that's why actually I slid it onto the arm, because opening and closing this, it's such a little small clasp. I would worry that this would eventually get maybe too loose, or it could potentially break. So that's all the more reason why I just kind of slid it over top of the existing arms. While we're at it, actually, let's pull the arm off completely on that side too, and we'll replace it again with the clawing, grabbing, I don't know, these kind of hands. Looks neat. Kind of just roll the sleeves back over the arms. You know, kind of the more I look at this head, the more I kind of dig the look of it, but I think I would still kind of go back, default to the more neutral head sculpt. It just kind of, to me, just reminds me more so of Frankenstein. Let's run through his posability, shall we? We've already kind of looked at his head. His head is on a ball joint, but again, the head sits a little too loose for my liking, just a tad too loose. The arms hinge outward. They don't seem like they're all that restricted by the jacket that he wears. By the way, also, if you're wondering, is there extra padding up here? The answer I would give you is no. There's like no padding in the shoulders. Maybe just a little bit at the top, but mostly that's all Frank right there. So the arms do move forward and back. He does have a bend in the elbow, but the hardest part is actually trying to figure out where that bend is, because it's not actually even so much. Let me just show you where it is. It's not even quite where an elbow would be. It's actually further up where that bend actually resides. So when you're bending it, you almost think to yourself, am I actually bending in the right place? Well, you are, but it seems like the elbow sits really high up on his arm. So when you're bending it, you want to make sure that you're fully aware of where that hinges first before you start getting a little too crazy on posability. The ball joint, or what looks to be a ball joint at the base, kind of basically where his torso attaches to the waist. You got your forward and back motion on your legs. The legs split out. Possibly there's a single or double hinge on the knee there. You can bend the knee. And again, you got your rotation in the foot. Doesn't really have any much of a ball joint. Even if it did, you remember where those boots cut off. So, you can rotate it, but not really much in the way of any sort of ankle pivot or anything like that. The Mezco Toyz 112 Collective Frankenstein did something that, well, both Superman and Batman didn't do, and that was make me a believer in a potential interest in this particular line. I've always kind of been on the fence, to be honest, when it came to the 112 Collective figures. Really looking at some of the figures, I always thought that they looked a little short, a little squat, and I felt like their proportions were a little too exaggerated. The Superman and the Batman didn't really wow me. While I thought the sculpts were really good, I thought the bodies actually ended up making the figures disappointing. Here I have an instance where I'm looking at a figure that doesn't really have an overly muscular body, so I can kind of appreciate what they wanted to accomplish with a smaller scale 7-inch figure. Kind of gives you the benefit of something where a higher end collector would want to be picking up like a Sideshow Collectibles or a Hot Toys. We're kind of getting the same sort of thing here with the smaller 112 Collective figures. And the end result is actually, it's a really decent looking representation of Frankenstein's monster. This has interested me so much that I'm super excited to see what they're going to have lined up for other Universal monsters. And you never know, actually, I might go back and want to pick up some more 112 Collectives figures just solely based on how well Frankenstein's monster turned out. I'm not super thrilled when it came to the interchangeable head. This is kind of like the go-to head for me, and he's basically in exactly the kind of pose I would want to display him with. Still though, at the end of the day, I'm pretty happy with how he turned out, and this may potentially open the door for future 112 Collective figure reviews on this channel. Today, once again, we were having a look at the Mezco Toyz 112 Collective. This was the Universal Monsters, Frankenstein's monster. If you guys like this video, certainly hit it with a like down below, and if you haven't had a chance to subscribe yet to this channel, hit that little subscribe button, and you won't miss a beat when it comes to future videos coming onto this channel. As always, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.